All right, I think we'll get started, everybody. Can you hear me, Nicole? She's nodding yes. This is Trevor Cameron here live from Sunnyside Nursery, the general manager. Today we're talking backyard berries. Thanks for joining us. Say hi to Nicole.
Good morning, everyone.
Hanging out on Snoqualmie Pass today. I'm just kidding. She's got a green screen up. But welcome to winter. We got some snow. So before I forget, I'm going to start by saying we are closed today. So please don't drive up. I'm not sure what's going to happen tomorrow. We're getting kind of dumped on the day, but call before you come up. We'll be doing the Rose class one way or another tomorrow, but we may not open depending on how much staff can make it in. So today it is just Nicole and I and Ben, and that is it. So I am here all day. I'm not going anywhere. I'll probably get out of here a little before 5, but email questions. I'll go back to the office after the class, call the store anytime. We're here to help. So I'm not going anywhere. We will be here, but just don't drive up. We don't have a cashier and there's no money in the tills, so we can't sell you anything today. How's that? So thanks for joining us. Backyard berries is always a fun topic. You know, gardening covers so many different topics around for home gardeners, but there's something more rewarding about the vegetables, the berries, the fruit trees. You know, you put in some work, you got a little labor of love, and all of a sudden in your backyard you get to snack, you know, in the summertime when your plants start producing berries. So this is one of those fun classes where you actually get to eat the fruits of your labor at some point. So we'll teach you a little bit about everything berries today. You got lots of time for questions afterwards as well. So we'll kind of move through at a pretty good pace because there's a lot to cover, but hopefully we'll answer most of your questions here during the class. So if everybody's got the handout, it's available on the website. If you need to grab it, if you email us, if you didn't get it, I can send it to you after the class, certainly if you don't get on the web. But this will kind of give you a little synopsis, some tips on just about everything we talk about today. So if we kind of follow the handout class line, the first thing we always talk about is just a little bit of general rules for berries. So, you know, to start with, we want to have good sunshine. We're not going to grow berries in shade. Maybe huckleberries you can get away with in a little bit of shade that we'll talk about later, but really for the gist of it, we want to have good sun, you know, at least 6 hours of sunlight a day. We want to have well-drained soil, except for blueberries. We'll talk blueberries specifically, but we don't mind being a little bit more wet around blueberries. If you live up in our neighborhood in Western Washington, I drive by a blueberry field that is thousands of acres every day, and it's flooded with water right now, and they're just fine. So blueberries can take a little bit more wet, but everything else we talk about, we want to keep a little bit higher and drier and not take the chance of root rot. Always good spacing, you know, keep that in mind. If you're packing some berries in your backyard garden, we want to make sure we have spacing and give these little creatures some room to grow. So as we go through specific things, I'll mention, give it room to spread, to grow up, and don't put too many plants in too small of a space. Let your plants mature. They'll just give you more and more berries as we get mature. Watering schedule is always key. You know, Western Washington is a interesting climate where we have pretty much rain, you know, for 6, 7, 8 months of the year. Probably don't need to water much in our gardens at all. But then we have a very Mediterranean summer. And if you're growing berries or thinking about it, we obviously leaf out in spring, we bloom, we start to produce berries. And most of the things that we're picking is in that June to September timeframe when we are a little bit dry. So these are plants we cannot walk away from summer irrigation. You know, we want to make sure they get watered adequately, especially new plants, but even mature ones. It's not like you have to run outside and soak them on a daily basis, but we need to get on kind of maybe a once a week. A little bit will depend on your soil structure, but if we mulch properly and we water a good soaking once a week, you'll keep the blueberries, the huckleberries, the strawberries, all the things we'll talk about pretty happy. If I'm a plant and I get drought stress, the first thing I'm going to do is drop my fruit. And then I'm going to go ahead and drop my foliage and try to go dormant a little bit early to save myself for the next season. So don't forget about watering a little bit in the summer. As we talk about fertilizer today, I really brought in 2 foods, and I'm going to show you both of them now. Let's make this real easy. And if you see the bright blue bag, if I go up towards the camera, that is our EB Stone Organics rhododendron food, but you can see what they finally did is put a nice big blueberry cluster on there for us, finally make a no-brainer. So I want acid fertilizer for blueberry. That's the one thing that I want to use a rhododendron type organic food on. So if you've got blueberries, this is the way to go. If we have raspberries, grapes, strawberries, anything else, we would go to our organic fruitberry vine food. This will be a little more neutral as far as pH. We don't need the acidity for the others, but this would be the way to go for all the other things we talk about today. So blueberries, we want to use that rhododendron food. Everything else, we go the fruitberry vine direction, okay? I just briefly mentioned mulching. Conserving water is an awesome way to go. You're adding nutrients, keeping down your water bill in the summertime if you mulch properly. Blueberries should be mulched a couple inches, if not 2 or 3 or 4 inches deep every single season. Bark, compost, sawdust. If we go out and we fertilize about this time of year, mid-February, early March, and we get our first dose of fertilizer down, then we can mulch right over the top of that and we're good to go. Maybe I go back and feed a second time in that late May to early June. That will help me with the production and producing wood over the summer that I'll get to enjoy the next season. So always mulch. Pruning, we'll talk about that as we go through the specific things, but we will cover a little bit of pruning today. I wish I was staying at a monster gigantic blueberry farm and I could go ahead and prune a big bush for you, but I've got a pretty good sized one in here. I'll just kind of show you the way they grow and kind of how we want to attack those coming out of winter. Container growing is a huge option. A lot of people, condos, apartments, small houses, deck, patio, you want to sit there by the hot tub and snack on a little piece of fruit like I do at my house. I got 2 blueberries in pots, but it's very easy to grow a lot of these things in containers. There's some great smaller varieties. Strawberries work awesome in containers. We have a great little dwarf raspberry you can grow in pots. So there's some options of some things you can go ahead and go container grow. If you're going to plant a pot, make sure that we utilize a good organic potting soil. We carry Edna's Best here. I think it's the best potting soil on the market. Never buy, not to knock Miracle-Gro, but don't get moisture control Miracle-Gro. It holds too much moisture. So we want to make sure we've got something very well drained that's got a lot of that nutrient. A lot of times for me, in particular, I'll mix a little compost in when I'm doing strawberry pots and things with my potting soil. The one thing to make a note on is if you're going to grow blueberries in containers, again, it's all about acidity. I will tell you from personal experience, on my 2 large jelly beans on my container, we get on the patio, we get an unbelievable amount of berries on them for a couple months in the summer. For my boys, get most of them. I get a couple every year, but I want acidity in that soil. So if I'm going to plant a blueberry in a pot, we have it here ready to go now. You'd want to get the Azalea Camellia Rhododendron planting soil. That's a ready to go potting mix, but we've added some sulfur. You've got some acidity built in there, and you will see your production and your happy blueberry double every year as long as we use that proper potting soil. Using Edna's isn't the end of the world, but again, from my experience, when I repotted mine last time and went to an acidic type potting soil that's more specific for rhododendrons, they really went crazy for years ever since. So try to make sure you use an acidic mix. I'll just mention kind of problems. Again, we'll talk specific things as we get to the categories, but if you had issues with your plants in 2020, I'm always here. We got some great staff that helps out at Sunnyside, email pictures, come down with a sample. I would always look back to last year. If you're going to ask me, I'm sure in the question and answer, should I spray? What do I do for this? What do I do for that? Think of the season before. And if I had an issue, I want to make sure my plants are cleaned up. I don't want any leaves sitting on the base. I want to clean that crown. Maybe I'll put some fresh mulch down in the fall. And perhaps this time of year, before we start to bloom, I'm going to get a good dormant spray. It's the same thing we talked about in the fruit class. If I had insect issues, getting a spray with the horticultural oil on it is the same idea. If I spray that on here during the dormant season, I coat the twigs, I get the crown, I cut off oxygen, I take care of probably most of the bug issues. If I get an application of the copper on there, that's going to help me with leaf spot diseases, other issues as well. And certainly I can monitor those during the growing season somewhat. If you end up spraying in the season, I'm just going to get this right now because, my rule has always been with edibles. If I come down to Sunnyside and I see an insecticide, something natural, organic, whatever it is, and it's marked for use on vegetables, that ensures me that it's not non-systemic. Don't ever spray anything systemic on your edible plants. You don't want that chemical going into the fruit, the foliage, and then you get it into your body. So we want to make sure we use something topical that's safe for vegetables. You know, this is tomato vegetable 3-in-1. That's a combination insect fungicide. Will work great on a lot of issues, from your tomato to, you know, taking care of aphids and small leaf spot on a blueberry or a strawberry or anything else in your yard. Super insecticidal soap. You'll see neem oil down here. There would be lots of good options for something safe, you know, natural / organic, that we don't have to go the chemical route when we're going ahead and taking care of an issue in the season. So remember to get that dormant spray down if you had problems last year. Clean up your plant if you haven't. Get old leaves out of there. Get all the, you know, crown cleaned out, all that, and you'll have a much happier plant here when we get to spring. If we start off, you know, kind of talking a little bit about, let's just start with blueberries, because that's probably the biggest category. I think a lot of folks are growing blueberries. Very easy to grow in our climate, Western Washington. If you kind of think of this in a couple different groupings of blueberries, traditionally we have what we would call northern high bush. So I can grow northern high bush blueberries all the way up into the upper Midwest, super cold hardy. They'll take some wet. You go to a U-pick farm, that's what you're picking, is a variety of northern high bush. If you see our list on site, it'll list all the varieties that we carry, which is quite a few. We just got them in this week, so we would have a large number of plants to choose from at this point. What you need to do is pay attention to is the season on high bush. You'll see them very clearly labeled at our nursery: early, mid, or late. There's 3 distinct seasons of when they bloom and hence ripen. So I want to be careful when I choose high bush blueberries. I need to have 2 different varieties to cross-pollinate to maximize my crop, which is what you want. And I want to make sure they're in the same season or adjacent season. So I'm okay if you grab an early and a mid, or a mid and a late, but I'm not going to get away with an early and a late. They're not going to have enough overlap of bloom for Mr. B to find his way between my 2 plants and cross-pollinate my blueberries for me. So high bush blueberries typically will get up into that 4, 5, 6 foot range. Nice sized plants, a little bit woody, great berry production. You'll see a huge amount of choices for size, for flavor, for use. You know, my own personal feeling is the large ones look awful nice, and the pancakes and the muffins, and are, you know, they certainly have some taste, but medium and small berries a lot of times, and the darker blues are going to have the more complex flavor. So it really depends on what you like. It's your own garden, your choice, but look at some options, because there's a lot of them out there for high bush. If I grab a couple of them here, they're kind of a little fun. So if you can see this little beauty, look at all those leaves out. Just kidding, it's still dormant. But you can see on that plant right there, all my buds coming out. This is all flower that's going to drop clusters of berries this first season. These are fabulous plants. This is one called pink popcorn. So it is a blueberry, but it is pink. Doesn't taste like popcorn, I'm sorry. But it tastes just like any other blueberry, but it is really fun to mix into fruit salads and have in the garden. A lot of people will ask you, what is that thing you get with berries on in there that's pink? It's just a pink blueberry. So great taste, easy to grow, good mid-season one, but kind of fun if you like to mix it up a little bit. As long as I've got this one up here, because this is one of the older ones we have in a 5-gallon, I'm hoping you can see the twig structure. You can see kind of on there. So if I look at that plant, this is a great example of high bush blueberry. I'm looking at what wood grew last year, has got all my flower buds and everything set. So if you're talking pruning, I walk out in the winter, I want to shear my blueberry back. What have you done? You've cut off all of your fruiting wood for that season. So when we prune blueberries, we want to thin out the oldest wood. So it's never up here, it's down in the base. So if I dig in to the crown of that plant and I look for the oldest wood as this grows, I can get in with a pair of loppers, a small saw, a hand pruner, and I want to pick out those biggest, oldest pieces the wood out, because blueberry continues to sucker off the root system. So I want this fresh 1-year-old wood coming off the roots every single season to keep rejuvenating my fruiting or burying wood. If I get in and cut out the oldest canes down there at the base, That'll keep my sunshine, my air circulation, and allow that plant to continue to give me that 1-year-old wood to maximize my production. So sometimes with me, if you've got older plants, I might suggest, when you're out picking them, it might be in July, June, July, August, depending on your variety. Maybe you take a little piece of flagging tape and you're like, holy smokes, that's a really old piece of wood. And I just picked a ginormous amount of berries off it. Maybe I go in there and tie a little flag on it that reminds me that next winter, that's probably the piece that I want to dig in at the base there and cut it right out of the center and open up that plant to keep the wood coming up, okay? So this is a perfect time of year to attack the pruning. You can certainly thin it out, remove the old wood, but I would never go out and shear back unless you don't care about eating anything, because then you've cut off most of your fruit that way. So high bush, I showed you pink popcorn, a couple other fun ones. If you can see the tag for that, this is a really cool one called Cabernet Splash. So that's got a fun, delicious berry to eat too, but this one's got purple leaves. So I think the difference with me from childhood to now is you can plant blueberries in your landscape as shrubs and not necessarily have a berry patch, but incorporate these in your garden just as shrubs, and you're out picking a couple weeds and, oh, there's a little snack for me when I'm out in the summer, because they do look like very nice shrubs, good foliage color, nicer growth habit, and you still get the benefit of having the berries on them. So that's Cabernet Splash. If we get some fun ones here, I think this is Mini Blue. So this is kind of right up my alley. This is a great little kind of derivative up our native blueberry. Little bit smaller fruit on it, but excellent flavor. So this is one called Mini Blues that we like. If we grab, this is a really fun one. You can even see how red that wood color is right now. So this is a species, the Vaccinium and Gustifolium. This is one we would find growing native, probably more down the Midwest to East Coast, but a very low spreading blueberry. You see those pictures maybe in the upper Midwest or the upper Eastern seaboard there of all those hillsides just glowing red in the fall with the fall color. This is what the bears and all the creatures are going for. They want those delicious little smaller berries with great flavor, but I think a very attractive little blueberry we can incorporate in the gardens as well. So that's a little different. And brand new, gonna make me do some lifting because this is the big one. But if I show you this guy, this isn't a 6-gallon. We have these as smaller plants as well. If you notice on that list, I highlighted the one called Bonus. And I won't claim that's a very good name for a blueberry because it really isn't. But Bonus is the kind of newest one. The first crops are out for the public this year. That is the record holder now. We've had fruit growers across the country trialing these, and they're talking about 12 to 14 pounds of blueberries off of one bush as it matures. So that's a massive amount of berries. Good flavor, nice size. If you were going to maximize your production, I'd certainly pick Bonus as one of your new school high bush ones to maybe mix with a little bit of old school one or one of your all-time favorites. So high bush is phase 1. If I grab kind of phase 2 here, sorry, I had to duck out and grab them. These will be your evergreen blueberries. Now, if I look at that plant, what's the difference between my high bush? I've got foliage on that right now. So this is Bountiful Blue, okay? And the sister plant here is called Sunshine Blue, okay? We get these in from Monrovia, a great grower. We just got a huge crop of them in this week, just in time for the snow. They're super, super hardy, so don't worry about growing them out in Washington. These would be partially self-fertile. I would still grab more than one variety. Grab one of each is perfect, but this is a little different creature. These are plants that I would have some color on the foliage in the winter. I'd have excellent berries to eat and much slower growing. So I've had a lot of folks even clip these into hedges, use them as a foundation shrub in their actual garden again, and not the berry patch. But I'd have something more in that 3-foot tall, 3-foot wide range as they develop. Much easier to control the size, and I'm not gonna, again, lose all my leaves in the winter. So these are good container choices. If you've got a nice large pot you wanna grow one in, they'd be great for those as well, okay? I wasn't gonna bring it up, but I feel like if I don't, I'm doing a disservice to you. There's a whole group of berries we will have a little bit later in the spring. One of our growers kind of made a mistake and we don't have them quite yet, but like in latest April, May into June and all summer long, if you look online, there's a brand of berries called lingonberries. And that's what I have on my patio, the jelly bean variety, but there's some outstanding smaller growers that you would have access to. Jelly bean would be one, pink icing would be another one. There's some new varieties coming out for 2021, Midnight Cascade and Sapphire Cascade. I've seen pictures of them. They actually almost hang if you want to grow them in a basket, which I would think would be kind of interesting. But there's some new things coming through that breeding program that are a little bit lower chill requirement. We can't grow those up in some of the colder areas of the country, but in Western Washington, they work awesome. And it's something we will have a bunch of. It's a little timing issue. They'll be just a little bit late this year. So if that interests you, again, I will not have them for a couple months. Don't come down and think you're going to find one. Just email us. I certainly can save your name and give you a heads up when the first crop comes down. Okay. So that kind of gets you a little bit on blueberries. We mentioned mulch is a must. I'm not a big bark guy, but I don't have a problem even with bark as long as you feed underneath that bark when you mulch them. Oh, hey, the hummingbird's coming to say hi to me in here. Hopefully he's not going to buzz bomb me here for the class. But you got mulch. You saw the rhododendron food would be the way to go on feeding. And at most, I'd do it again coming out of winter, and then maybe that early summer dose would help you with a little bit of wood in the winter, in the summertime. So second, let's do a little bit of raspberries. Raspberries, you always have the basic choice as a gardener. Do I want June crop? One big, massive crop a year. I go pick it. I freeze it, I process it, I do what I want to do with it, and I'm done. Or do I want everbearing? Do I want to walk out starting in June and pick fresh berries for quite a few weeks and then have a whole nother crop to pick in that late summer, fall time frame? So folks that like to make jams, jellies, whatever, may want one big crop. Let's process it, let's freeze some, let's be done with it. For me, I like everbearing. I want to walk out and pick a few fresh berries off and on through most of the summer into the fall and maybe not freeze quite as much. So that's the starting point of your choice. Do you want one of those two? If we talk about something maybe a little different for raspberries, many of you have tried them. It would be, there's the logo, you'll see the bushel and berry, and that one we do have. This is raspberry shortcake. So this is thornless. I'm not going to bleed when I'm picking my raspberries. It's the only one that's thornless, but this is a very small plant. I'm just going to grow 2 or 3 feet tall, produce berries in June. I can grow it in a pot if I like. And it's one that certainly can grow in the garden as well. Now, I want to be clear. If you've done raspberries, you know what I mean. Raspberries are running, spreading plants. I'm not going to plant a raspberry right next to my front door and go, ooh, isn't that pretty? I'm going to develop more stems. The root system grows quite extensively and continues to pop up as far as you let it. So typically raspberries, we want to set up in a row and try to contain them and give them maybe a wire 4 feet off the ground that I can arch my canes over and get my canes up off the ground so I can pick them a little bit easier. So try to set up a separate area probably for the raspberries, except maybe the raspberry shortcake. But I just want to be honest, even if I plant that little dwarf one in my garden, it's not just going to stay there. You can see already, if you look at the crown of that plant, can you see some wood from last year? And what have I got coming out of the soil? I've got more leaves. There's another stem, another stem, another stem. This is going to continue to spread and give me more berries every season, but I want to make sure I've got room for it to develop side to side. You can always go in the winter, an easy time to divide and transplant. You can chop those raspberries up, take root divisions, move them around. Very, very easy thing to contain by doing some root pruning on. So certainly that's an option as well. Now we mentioned feeding. Again, the fruit berry vine food is the way to go. I don't need a lot of acidity with the raspberries, so a good general fruit berry vine organic food works great. This time of year gets me through spring. Maybe one more time, that late spring, early summer gives me a nice flush of growth over the summer months. Pruning, is going to be dictated by what you have. So if you think about how a raspberry grows, let me grab one here. You know, here's a little bit bigger one. This is Mr. Tulamine, a good old school one. So that's a pretty good sized plant. You know, I've got canes up a couple feet tall. I'm going to have all kinds of fruit on that the first season. Again, I can see leaves coming out of the soil here. I've got new stems that are going to start out. But what would I have left from last year is what's going to produce my berries this year. So I'm never going to go out and cut this all off. It'll grow because it's a raspberry, but I won't have any fruit that next year. Knowing Tulamine is a June bearing, I want to leave all that old wood on June bearing varieties. I want to pick my raspberries, then I can cut down stems. Okay, I hope that makes sense to everybody. I can cut out some stems after I pick, because all that wood that grows this season is what I'm going to get to pick the following year. Okay, so going in the winter on a June bearing one, you know, and thinning out canes. You know, if I've got an old row that is just overgrown, yes, I want to get all the way to the ground, just like we talked about with the blueberry, and I want to get some of those oldest pieces out and removed. I want sun, I want air, and I want to have that root system send me some fresh canes up. So yes, doing that in the winter, absolutely. Or cutting them back a little bit for height to make them more manageable is okay, but I'm never going to cut them all the way off, okay? Now, if we go ever-bearing, that's got both kinds of wood. So the wood that I left from last year is what I pick in June, and then all that growth that comes up during the growing season, I get to pick later in the year. So we get two types of fruit on the ever-bearing varieties. So now you've got some options. If you want to really cut your row back and you don't care about June as much, have at it. You know, this time of year, late winter, early spring, cut some of those old canes down and open up your row. I might not have the fruit to pick in June, but all that wood starts coming up very rapidly. That will still bloom late summer into fall, and I'll still have some berries to pick late in the season, okay? So hopefully that answers a little bit of the pruning questions. But again, raspberry is all about the root system. You can set yourself up a nice little tidy 20-foot by 3-foot wide a row of them. Maybe you put a barrier so the roots don't grow side to side. You know, I don't like them in lawns, I will tell you that, because you're going to fight them coming up next door on the turf. So try to keep them in a nice open dirt area, not mixed in with grass. It'll make it a little bit easier for feeding as well. So so give them some room. Don't be bashful about doing some root pruning. Most of you with old rows should probably be going along the edge of your row with the big sharp spade and chopping the edge of that row to sever those roots that are running out into the area you don't want them, okay? I've talked to a couple folks, look online, you know, maybe find a nice 2-foot deep bamboo barrier. You know, it's a real hard, thick plastic that you could probably put around your row and almost encase your raspberries in a particular area and don't let them spread quite as much. Now, the last thing I'll say on raspberries is we talked about blueberries and wet. They're okay with some wet, especially in the winter. Don't mind being mulched up the stems, all the rest of that. Raspberry is the exact opposite. If you have bad drainage, you've got hard pan clay, I've got water issues in the winter, you are not going to have luck with raspberries coming back. They're very prone to root rot, anthracnose, all kinds of other issues that stem from the fact the soil is too wet. So make sure we're in a well-drained area. Maybe if you can build up even a box above your ground to grow them in a nice raised area, might help you keep them out of that groundwater a little bit, but make sure we've got good drainage, okay? Now, strawberries, let's see what we're doing for time. This is going to be a long class. Strawberries, real quick, it's the same discussion as the raspberries. I want to pick between two things. Do I want June bearing, one big crop to eat, process fresh, make jam, freeze, whatever, or do I want ever bearing? Do I want to walk out and have multiple bloom seasons through the season and pick fresh berries a little bit here and a little bit there? Again, as a gardener, I choose to do ever bearing with my two boys. My wife and I, we love strawberries, so we can go out and pluck a couple fresh ones pretty much all summer into fall, well into fall. If I was a producer, a you-pick farm, that tends to be more on the opposite. I want one massive crop that I can pick and do something with and then be done with for the season. So here at Sunnyside, again, if you look on our website, the list, we just got our first big batch of strawberries in, so we got some beautiful plants if you want them here once this freeze stops in a day or two. You can take them home and pop them right in the ground. They're really easy to grow. You know, count on a little 4-inch strawberry. Let me grab you one. This is a great little newer one called Eversweet. Everything's got great labels on it here. They're clearly marked everbearing, June bearing. You got pictures on most of them. You know, Eversweet's a great everbearing one for our climate. If I'm going to buy starts like this, you go, wow, that's really not much plant. I'll be picking berries off that plant this season, I can guarantee you. So if I plant these into a patch in the ground, maybe I want to plant these about a foot or 18 inches apart. I tend to like making a W pattern and alternating rows. You can certainly go straight if you want to. I just think the W kind of fills in better. So when I plant this, this is what we would call a mother plant. This is your original mother. You just pop it in the ground. What happens, I hate to say, with the mother is she gets off tired after about 3 or 4 years. So this plant will stop producing fruit in 3 seasons, usually, maybe 4 on some. But as this grows, if you've had strawberries, I get runners and I get fresh plants that just continue to develop off that mother plant. Those continue this cycle. So for me, I'm always walking out about this time of year and I'm looking at my patch, my pots, everywhere I have strawberries and saying, okay, these are older and woody. Let's take these out, leave the runners. Sometimes you can take the mother plants and divide them a little bit and still get some more life out of them. But we have to do something. If you leave your patch alone, you're going to have berries here and there, and you're going to have big areas where there's old plants that are out of gas that will not produce anymore. So we want to make sure we clean those out sometimes. There was a few people that emailed, and I'm sure there'll be some questions on strawberry patches. You know, how do I keep my patch clean? You know, I'm the kind of the OCD guy, so mine is spotless here coming out of winter because I clean it the fall. But it's not too late. You know, if you're fighting slugs, if you're fighting rot, you know, fruit that's rotting on the vine, so to speak, there on the strawberries, I've got mildew, I've got, you know, whatever it is, it's all about that sun and that air again. I want all that debris cleaned up. I mean, it might take you a little bit on a big patch, but if you go through there this time of year and pop out your old tired mother plants, leave the runners, clean up dead leaves, get all the debris raked up, put a dose of fertilizer down. Again, that fruitberry vine food, I sprinkle compost over the top of that over my whole patch, even sometimes burying the little starts just a touch. The rain flushes that all down, and man, you're going to have a much better patch going for this season, okay? So spend a little time cleaning it up before we get into spring, or we're going to fight again, probably the fruit rots, the mildews, the botrytis, other issues that may get into the strawberry. So a little bit of cleaning will go, lots of words for that. If you are fighting slugs, because I recall one lady for sure mentioned slugs on an email, get Sluggo. We don't want any poisons. We don't want any murder, death, kill for slugs. We get Sluggo, is all natural iron phosphate. So I can go out right now and start sprinkling that around my plants. It doesn't hurt anything. It's not going to hurt pets, birds, humans, people, anything. It's totally safe. Just breaks down into more iron in the soil. So if I can utilize Sluggo and avoid the metal aldehydes, the old Cories and all the gels and the murder, death, kill, skip all that. Just get Sluggo. It works just as well. That's a great way to use around your edible plants during the garden, okay? Now we're going to whip through a couple here because we're going to go along. So I'm going to talk grapes for 1 second, you know, and grapes is always an interesting one here in Western Washington versus Eastern Washington, a little bit like the fruit. Some folks want to make wine, some want table grapes, some want this, some want that. I'll be brutally honest, your choice of grapes is going to be very limited due to the Department of Agriculture in our state, you know, and if you're joining us from other places, I'm sure it's the same. If I'm a wine grower or a commercial grower of grapes, I really want to be careful what home gardeners are utilizing in their own landscapes. So we have to buy what's called VC or virus certified stock. Our growers have to spend a lot of money to have their clones genetically tested so they come in clean, not carrying pathogens that you may have one in your yard. A bug comes down, gets the pathogen, flies next door to St. Michel or whatever winery you're nearby, and boom, now you've got an infection that's gonna kill some grapes. So we carry quite a bit here. It's gotten better the last couple years. We've got quite a bit in right now. We'll have some more plants coming in here through spring as well, but you've got options for everything from black manuka, a real dark one, to Einset seedless, the Canadice, a couple of good red ones, Jupiter grape if you like blues. I like the white seedless grapes, the Himrod, the Interlaken. Lots of good choices, different flavors. They all got great picture tags on them. You can come down and take a peek at what you like, but very easy to grow. If I'm going to grow a grape, again, I want to be careful a little bit with summer watering, like we talked about before, but I need something to grow it on. A grape is going to be a pretty good sized vine. Let me grab one. This one looks happy. He's already starting to arch. So I've usually come in staked up. You know, these are staked up a couple feet with some nice wood. We tend to get a little bit bigger plants so that you get fruit right away. I think this is a Grape, one of the ones we found from Europe, a good seedless red with good flavor. So this is one here. Again, if I'm looking at growing this, I want to arbor, I want to fence, I want to make myself a little 4-foot tall T structure, something that I can train this grape along to get sun, to develop wood, and then produce my vines. You've seen, I'm sure everybody's seen commercial grape operations, and we're not building a building to grow them on. They've a lot of times got real simple T structures or a cross piece running wires that I can, again, train my plants out along and get good production. So pick your, you use your own style, whatever flavor you like. There's going to be a good grape for you. Some good for juice. You can make some wine on some of them if you like the wine, or certainly a lot of good slip skin, seedless, fresh eating grapes here. That's kind of what I try to do, is get a lot of good seedless varieties that home gardeners will have good luck with. Okay. So the last thing I'd say on grapes, again, the same food, we want to use that fruit berry vine food. But if we're talking about pruning, because this is the time of year we want to prune our grapes back. So you can have some old grapes, and I've seen some driving around, and even in my neighborhood, that are massive plants. I mean, a grape will keep growing and growing. It's a vine. So I might end up with, a big, huge trunk and 20 feet in both directions if you've got the room to let it grow. I want to cut all that tendril wood off. I don't need any of that real thin wood from last year. And usually I want to leave little short sections of old wood, about 2 or 3 buds long. That's where I'm going to bloom and drop my fruit off. So don't be bashful pruning grapes. You can cut them back quite a bit this time of year coming out of winter, and off they go again. I get wood development, and that way you can let your plant, kind of grow slow and steady a couple feet every season, versus you might see it grow 8 feet in one year, and all that thin wood is probably going to die out that next winter. We want to remove that and let it kind of go back to that slow and steady to keep the production up. Okay. So there's a couple things on grapes for you. Huckleberries. I love, huckleberries on ice cream. I think it's one of the better things on earth, if you want me to divulge the truth. We got a great restaurant in Everett, Anthony's, and Huckleberry Slump is about the best dessert that's ever been invented. So if you've been to Anthony's, you're probably smiling going, oh, I wish I could go down there and get a piece of that right now. But huckleberries, very easy to grow. I mean, that's essentially a native plant in Washington. The deciduous ones, the red ones, are really hard to find. I'm hoping we can find a whole bunch of them this year. I've got some calls out. That's the one, if I was up hiking here in the woods, I would see an old stump, an old cedar stump or hemlock or anything, and what's growing out of it. Whoa, that's kind of cool. There's a green little twiggy berry bush growing out of the top of that thing, and it's got the sour, which I like, sour flavor, more of a red huckleberry. I got one in my backyard. I took an old apple stump, took all the wood out of it, plopped it on the ground, planted it in there, so it kind of looks a little bit native. So red huckleberry is the first option. That would be deciduous. If you go evergreen, very attractive plants. This is evergreen huckleberry. You can see pink buds coming out of that right now, getting ready to bloom. This will give me my dark blue-black little berry. It's got great flavor, and we would have a bunch of those produced here over the summer into fall. So evergreen huckleberry, little evergreen shrub. Maybe I get up in that 3-foot tall range. It works in sun. It works in part shade. It's a great one to kind of fit in with the native yard. Vaccinium ovatum, or native, is a native plant all up and down the Pacific coast for us. So I can utilize that in my landscape, get some tasty berries, and I think it's a real pretty shrub. It's got a little red in the leaves, nice evergreen, easy to grow, easy to prune, good one to choose. If you want something kind of fun, I search these out every year. You can see that one's got some nice red on it, similar leaf. It's a little lower growing, not quite as tall. This is a little plant called Golusaceae, which is native, a huckleberry native to the Appalachian part of the country. So works great here, but it's going to grow just a foot, foot and a half tall and spread along the ground a little bit. Turns bright red, but doesn't lose its leaves. Got a delicious berry on it. It's kind of like our evergreen huckleberry. But this one's got a great name. They call it Buried Treasure. So that's a good one to look for if you like a little native looking plant that we can fit in Western Washington garden. This is a great grower with some good color and I think looks really nice in the landscape again. So check out that Buried Treasure. My Swedish accent's terrible, so I'm not even going to try, but this is your lingonberry, okay? So lingonberries are very popular up here. We get a lot of people asking for them. Super cold hardy, evergreen, short again, great along borders or little rows. It's a real easy plant to grow. This will have a little bigger red berry with great flavor, another good one on ice cream. But we do have lingonberries available. These are gallons. We also get little starts of it as well if you want to plant a patch. So lingonberries would fit in with that same kind of discussion, okay? If we talk kiwis real quick for a minute, you know, kiwis are something we can grow in Washington. You can grow them in a lot of areas of the country. It's just a choice on what you want to try. So I think the books and the web would probably differ from me, but I would consider ourselves a safe zone 7 still. I think a lot of people think we're moving up into the zone 8 world with global warming, but I think you're taking a chance on some zone 8 plants if we're not careful. So zone 7 is right at the cusp of the fuzzy kiwi realm. So if you want store-bought fuzzy kiwis, you can grow them up here. We have plants here on the property that we get an unbelievable amount of fruit from here at the nursery that we would grow. Traditionally, fuzzy kiwi, you always bought a he and you bought a she, and you planted them, let them intermingle and do their thing, if you know what I mean. So we would have the he and the she mixing, and then we get the fruit on the female vine, not the male. So I had to have 2. I'm not carrying he's and she's as much anymore because now, thanks to Monrovia, they have hybridized a new kiwi. We call this Sweet and Solo. So if you see that picture, that's our great store-bought quality fuzzy kiwi. But now I have male and female genetics on one plant. So I could go home and plant this out in my yard, let it grow forever, and I'm going to get kiwis and not have to worry about 2. The hardest thing with kiwi is somebody coming down with a fuzzy kiwi and saying, well, I bought 2 and 1 died and I don't know which is which. And I bought a house and it has a kiwi and I don't get fruit. What do I have? There's no way to tell the he or the she unless we go back to, you know, kind of botany class back in the day and we get a flower. So if yours blooms, look at that flower and you're either going to see a pistil or you're going to see a stamen. So you can bring a picture if you want it, if you're not sure, but that will let you know what you have. Then we could still locate you the other sex to match with that one and start your production off. But if you're starting from scratch now, take advantage of the new hybrid stuff and get the self-fertile one. That's a no-brainer, easy thing to grow. So that's fuzzy kiwi. If we get, there's a tall one. We get some big ones of these, and we'll have small too. That's almost as tall as me. But this is what we would call kiwi magic. So this is Arguta, a little different species of kiwi that we could grow all the way up into Alaska, you know, in very cold areas of the country. This would have this little bit smaller fruit with the smooth skin, not fuzzy, great flavor, tastes just like kiwi, nothing changes. Some people call these grape kiwis, although they're a little bigger than grapes. But this would be the hardy option. Kiwi magic again, so fertile. I don't have to worry about buying 2 plants. I can plant that in 1 vine and I'll be all set. You can also, we will have some come in too of this where I've got some specialty ones in the males and the females, and I can play around on planting 1 of each as well. But if you want a no-brainer, take a look at that kiwi magic. Now kiwi is a huge plant. You know, let's be honest. I don't know if my mom and dad are watching this, but I can recall childhood watching the kiwi take over a 2-story deck at our house back in the day. If we plant kiwi, it is going to grow, and it is going to grow fast. I mean, we have to prune it to keep it controlled. You need to give it some support. So whether it's an arbor, a structure, a fence line, you set up a wire again, something to grow it on. It's a vine. We want it to wrap around and support itself as it develops, but we need something to grow it on to keep that kiwi happy. We want full sun. Kiwi is not one, especially the fuzzy, we're going to get away with in part shade. I want as much sun as you got, and we're going to have a happy kiwi plant moving forward too. So if you've seen the fuzzy ones, that would give you kind of that tropical look. You know, Mr. Smith, the whistling gardener that owns this place, is the tropical man. He likes his big leaves. So if I look out at kiwi, I'm going to see those big, fuzzy, kind of subtropical looking foliage, a really cool flower, and have a delicious fruit to eat here as we get into mid-late fall, okay? As far as pruning, just like the grape, if you ask me, don't be hesitant on cutting these guys back. I mean, if you let kiwi go, it'll take over your house. I mean, it'll keep growing and growing and growing until you tell it not to. So they probably have like 65 feet as far as a distance they'll grow if you really wanted to. So don't be bashful late winter. Get them cut back a little bit. Leave some good old wood that will drop those flowers and produce, but I don't have to leave all that wispy wood. I can really get those cut back a little bit coming out of the winter time, okay? Last thing, and we'll do some questions, is brambles. And I want to just talk kind of generally about brambles. Everybody, when I say that word, I'm talking about blackberry, boysenberry, tayberry, marionberry, all those little creatures that we would call brambles. You know, they're going to grow up, they tend to arch and produce fruit. You get typically maybe 3 or 4 feet tall if you're a good pruner. A lot of the good ones you can keep maintained a little bit. But again, I want to set up some sort of row, a T-post with a wire that I can take my canes and tie them up so they get sun, they're off the ground, and I can get at them to pick a little bit easier. You know, speaking for me, I don't think there's anything better on earth than marionberry pie. That would be up there with the huckleberry on the ice cream. So I'll take marionberries over anything. When they come up with a thornless one that I don't bleed when I pick them, it'll be the best ever. But marionberries is a great choice. We have marionberries ready to go. If you like the marionberry, it's a derivative off blackberry. I think a little tangier flavor, which I like a little bit. The blackberries that we have growing in the ditch, in the woods, and around here, A, aren't even native. They're Himalayan blackberries, and B, this is not what we're talking about growing in your yard. So if we want to get blackberries going, we're talking about gourmet blackberries, extremely large fruit with a much better flavor and consistent production. So these are name varieties. We're not going out in the ditches and digging up a couple blackberries for you and saying, oh, here, take these home. They're certainly edible too. I see people picking them all over the place around here, but this is a little different creature when you come and buy one, a little bit more on the gourmet side. So we mentioned marionberries. Where'd my blackberry stash go? Oh, here we go. So we just planted these. Don't those look lovely? They're full of foliage. No, they're still dormant, but they'll leaf out here quick. This is one we get in called Triple Crown. This would be one that is thornless. So if I look at this wood, I don't have thorns on it. I'm not going to bleed when I'm picking my blackberries, but that's a great gourmet blackberry for home gardeners. If you like the blackberries for any kind of use and not have to worry about the thorns, take a look at the Triple Crowns. Just before I forget, yes, we have nice marionberries. There's my fave. There's a marionberry. And again, I've got some thorns on them, but what's the difference? If you can see, that's a pretty good sized plant. We don't deal with little bare root cuttings anymore. It's been probably 15, 20 years since I've sold those to anybody because you'll have to wait 3 or 4 years to get fruit. This, I'm going to have some berries to pick this first year. So I want you to have fruit right away. So that's marionberry. If I show you kind of a couple newer ones here, this is one called Prime Arc Freedom, okay? So this one's a little bit unique in the blackberry world. A, I'm thornless. I got no thorns on my stem, so I'm not going to bleed when I'm picking. And 2, this crops twice a year. This is the only blackberry that's out right now that produces fruit on what we call primocanes and floricanes. So I will have fruit come off this wood from last year here in that early midsummer time, but all the growth that comes out this spring and summer will bloom out, and I should have a second crop that I can attack in that fall period. So if you want to have a little bit more of an ever-bearing type blackberry, something like Prime Arc Freedom may be the way to go for you, okay? The last one I'll show you is a new one. Just came out from Monrovia. It's got a great name called Superlicious. That just sounds good. So Superlicious is a little different creature. Again, thornless. I don't have any thorns on there. Big gourmet blackberries, very tasty. But this is one I would almost say you could grow in a pot. So if you were going to come in and say, hey, I like the idea of having a blackberry, but I'm in a condo, or I don't want it in the ground, I have a nice size container, you know, that's a plant that I could grow in a pot very easily, give it a little bit of support, maybe an obelisk or a fun little trellis or something to train it on. But I would get really good production on a small little 3 or 4 foot plant with some incredibly tasty berries. So that might be the one for the container lovers to give a try as well. Okay. As far as feeding, same idea. We want to make sure we use that fruitberry vine food if we go through the same schedule. Right now, this time of year, and then maybe one more time in early summer, even in the containers, you know, whether it's this blackberry we're talking, the raspberry, the blueberry, whatever it is, still put your fertilizer dose around in that container, take a little bit of compost or bark and mulch over the top of that. The food's locked in. You'll help with the watering a little bit in that summer in the pot as well, but that gets that plant in the container fed equally, okay? Now the last, I'll just mention a couple things. This next week, we have kind of some of our specialty stuff coming up. So if you wanted honeyberries, you know, goji berries, boy, what else? There's more than that I can't think of right now, but all kinds of other berries coming in. There's olives on that list, all kinds of fun stuff. That would all be coming in starting next week. So if you wanted some of those things like a little bit different berries, check in starting next week. We should start to have a pretty good crop. The honeyberries are in the honeysuckle family. Some people call them haskaps. Looks like a blueberry that's like stretched out like an oval. They got great flavor, super cold hardy. Just keep in mind with honeyberries, we have to have 2 different varieties to cross-pollinate. There's no self-fertile honeyberries, okay? The goji and the gumi, you can get away with just the one. So we would have both those in, and that's kind of a fun one to try. You know, if you looked up on the web at the super fruits and the super berries, and I want all these crazy antioxidants and this crazy anti-cancer compound and all the rest, the gojis, the gumis, some of those specialty berries are extremely highly rated for nutrition. So it's something kind of fun to try as well, okay? So that is, look at that, 51 minutes. I could talk probably for another hour on berries, but let's just mention a couple things here for the class, and then we'll do a bunch of questions because I got a feeling there's going to be quite a few. And Nicole's nodding, yes, there is quite a few. So there you go. Just to remind you again, we're not going to be open today with the snow. We're just trying to keep the South safe. So email, call me. I'm here all day. We will do the Rose class tomorrow for sure if you're joining us. I don't know if we'll open. We'll have to see how much snow accumulates again overnight. For sure, we'll be back on Monday because this is all supposed to change back to our typical Western Washington rain here by Monday. So we'll be back in business this week. Discounts for the class. You know, they start today. They'll be going all through the week through Friday. All berry plants, period, 20% off. So all the stuff I've showed you, there's a lot more I didn't show you. We've got a zillion choices in right now. We've got a pretty maximum selection of berries after the specialty things come in. You got more choice now than you will all year. Come down and take advantage of the 20% off this week. Both the fertilizers I mentioned, the rhododendron food, which is good for blueberries, and you could save money and put it all over the rest of your yard, rhodies and everything. That's 20% off. And the fruitberry vine food, 20% off as well. So take advantage of those. We've got a great selection of plants in right now. Again, if you can't come down, email a list. We'll save some stuff for you. You can pop down this week and grab it, but hopefully we'll see you down here at the nursery. So I appreciate everybody joining us. And with that, let's start the fire of the questions. Here we go.
Just in case, you know, there's any questions, we talked about some of these things, and this is being recorded. It'll pop up later today on our website and also on YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel so that you get notifications there. And there's also a survey that pops up at the end when you leave. If you're gracious enough to fill that out for us, we would really appreciate it. But also make sure if you include any sort of questions or, you know, specific feedback, that you include your name or email, because we don't really have any way to know who exactly submits each response. So if you send us a question or need us to respond back to you, make sure you include your email, or just shoot us an email. We'd be happy to respond to you that way as well. That's Sunnyside Nursery at msn.com. So let's start with a few questions here. Thanks for hanging late with us. We're probably going to go over just a little bit. We don't go any later than 11:30. So if you have to bounce, we understand, but thanks for joining us today. Strawberries, Trevor, are they going to be okay in the snow up here? Can you transplant them, you know, after some of this coldness goes away?
Yeah, this is the perfect time of year to get the patch divided, mixed up, newly planted. I would definitely avoid the next couple days just because it is our one little cold spell in the winter. But once it thaws out here next week, I'd pop them right in the ground. If I could pick my laptop up and show you here, there's about 1,000 strawberries here. We just got them in yesterday and threw them in the cold frame here. And there's some blooms coming out. I mean, you're going to have fruit on them right away. So absolutely attack your dividing the patch, clean it up, get all that done here in the next couple weeks.
And are they strawberries okay to plant underneath roses or underneath some other type of plant?
I don't mind that at all because it is a ground cover essentially. You'd find other types, alpine strawberry, beach strawberry, doing the same thing. Just be real careful again, sun and not crowding them out. You know, I wouldn't want a lot of debris following and burying my plants. As long as we've got some room and some air underneath there, maybe your roses are up off the ground a little bit, perfect. Use that as a ground cover down below, and be careful of the feeding. You know, roses you tend to feed quite a bit. Rose food's not going to hurt strawberry at all, organic, but make sure those strawberries get watered and get a little food for sure.
And can you talk about well, should we trim all the leaves back on our strawberries right now?
Yeah, well, not all of them. If yours look like mine, maybe you let them. Again, I clean mine up in the fall and then I check it again this time of year. If you haven't, you probably just like a little plant here. Let me grab one. You know, you probably got a fresh little tuft of small green leaves coming out of the crown and then a bunch of yellow, brown, black stuff laying flat. That's what I want to go along and clean all that old foliage off and get it out of there. That's slug egg haven. That's where you're going to get mildew, other issues from last year. So leave that crown alone. You're not going to take every leaf off. If you're looking at a fresh green leaf, no spotting, discoloration, I'd leave it on there and get rid of everything else.
If we've had some people say that they have issues towards the end of the summer with their strawberries getting moldy. Can you identify what the cause of that would be?
Well, it could be a lot of different reasons. If it happens, bring a picture in or a little sample. I would guess either botrytis, which means we're probably a little bit too much overhead watering. It probably crowded maybe a little bit if we get a little more sun, a little more air through that patch. If I had a lot of moldy berries, the first thing I'd be doing here coming out of winter is opening up my patch, getting rid of some other plants, making sure I've got some space in between the runners and things, and cleaning all that old debris out, because that's usually what travels from season to season.
We have a lot of people asking about mummyberry and how terrible it is, and what are good ways to control that, get rid of it.
Well, I kind of knew that mummyberry would come up at some point with blueberries. I wish I had a magic answer for you, but I'll try to say it in a couple different ways. There's nothing organic, natural, anything that's going to take care of mummyberry. So if you have mummyberry and you want to spray or prevent it, we have to go back to the old Daconil, or what they call funginil now. It is a chemical. It's a fungicide. Honestly, if it was a non-organic blueberry grower, it's what they would be using to protect their plants. It's not systemic. It doesn't get into the berries. It's safe to use. You wash them off. Everything's fine, but that's really the only option for a spray. I would recommend you attack it culturally. First of all, look online. I could show you at Oregon State, Washington State, the good ag schools will have a list of mummyberry resistance. So if you're choosing a blueberry, you could look right on there. These are the best. These are the okay. These are the worst. You know, and look at what your options are to start with. If you have it already, we want to make sure that, you know, if you're going to try to save it, you want to really cut that plant out. Anything that had moneyberry, that's got to go. I don't want any debris. I don't want any leaves. I don't want old fruit. I don't want all that wood in the crown. All that has to go. I've got to get all that cleaned out here in the winter, then spray, and perhaps I can save my plant. I'm going to be honest, it's worked for some. Others are going to give up at some point. And just remember, get that plant out of the ground. If you prune, don't go touch another blueberry. Just do the one. Go sterilize your pruners and then go hit the next one. Make sure you get rid of it. If it's gone, it's gone. Get it out of that ground. Take it, get all the debris out of there, bring fresh soil in and replant a variety. Hopefully that's a little bit more resistant.
We've had a lot of questions about growing different types of berries together, you know, say a raspberry next to a blueberry. Is that okay? Are there certain tips or recommendations? How far should you plant them?
You know, I don't have an issue, but again, you know, we talked about the growth habits of a lot of these plants. Raspberry is one that's going to run. So I don't know that I'd have a raspberry in the ground or a blueberry right next to it. But if I have a row of raspberries, you know, nothing is against having a row, you know, 3, 4, 5 blueberries 6 feet away. I mean, it's not like we have to define, you know, put them into different areas of the yard. The blueberry likes acidity, which is a little bit different than most of the other things. Raspberries don't mind a little bit. Strawberries don't mind a little bit. It's not that, but you're going to be really applying extra acidity to the blueberry area. So as long as those have room to be mulched and fed with a different fertilizer, I don't care if you've got something else right next door. It'll be fine. Like I said a couple of times, at some point here in spring, we have an edible landscape class, which essentially is that, you know, take advantage of a lot of these new types of blueberries and raspberries and all these things that don't get as big and frankly look more attractive in the landscape, and plant them with rhodies and pieris and perennials and other plants that you would typically see in a landscape. We don't have to have a separate back area, you know, oh, well, this is my garden and I grow my berries back in the corner. You can certainly do it that way, but I think a lot of folks that I talk to now are trying to incorporate them in with other plants in their yard, which is totally acceptable.
What about using, you know, homemade fertilizers, you know, or things to help in terms of like coffee grounds or moss or things like that? What are your thoughts?
You know, coffee grounds are always going to be acidic. I don't have a problem with that. If you're a coffee drinker, you probably have plenty of them, and you can certainly take them out and throw them underneath blueberries and other things. That's not fertilizer per se. It's really just going to add a little bit of acidity to the soil, which is fine. Homemade fertilizers, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but if you're talking compost that you make at home, oh, that absolutely. There's no reason you can't utilize your own compost. Again, it's just with that with the blueberry in particular, use your compost for mulch, whatever you got, but use a good acidic type fertilizer underneath. I would not, you know, I'm not into speed growth, so I want slow and steady, which is why I'm always organic. I'd rather build the soil, have happier plants that way. I have some people would go down and buy a bag of, you know, triple 15 or something. Is it the end of the world? You know, probably not, but I would rather have my berries grow at a manageable rate that I can control. And something organic is going to add a little bit more of the nutrition in there too.
What about, can you talk about spraying in relationship to the bees and making sure that you don't hurt them and, you know, that you're working with the bee timing?
Yep. Well, that's a great question, because honestly, it doesn't matter if we talked about this at fruit class, the rose class tomorrow, today, any class period. We don't spray open flowers. It just doesn't matter if it's an organic, if it's natural, if it's a chemical. As long as we don't spray open flowers, we're not going to hurt the bees. Always let the buds open, the flowers open, let the bees out there do their thing. Then when the petals drop off, I'm okay to spray. You know, strawberries is probably the hardest one, because you've got the bloom and then another one and another one. As long as you're careful and just not spraying right on the insects, whether it's neem oil or, again, I only use organic at my house, you're not going to hurt the bees at all. We just want to make sure we we try to avoid spraying when the flowers are actually open.
Excellent. What about maximizing fruit production? Should you take some of the flowers off? Are there things you should do for the first year to help kind of amplify your fruit?
Yeah, you know, I would never say no to that. I don't think it's necessary with berries. We talked about this at fruit a couple weeks ago. Yes, in the fruit tree case, I think thinning out some of the blossoms to get a bigger apple here and not as much here is probably a little bit beneficial when young. With berries, it's not going to matter for the size, the quality, anything like that. I would rather have you get as many berries as you can. So I've never went out and picked any off mine. Part of this is probably, you know, and again, it's, you know, I've been old school gardener and I've been new school gardener. And, you know, for years, all you did was come down and buy a little worthless piece of wood with 2 roots on it for a raspberry or a grape or any of that stuff. It was all bare root. I quit doing it years ago because A, half of them probably don't even grow, and B, they're not as cheap as they were back in the day. And C, I want you to get fruit this year. You know, any of the stuff I showed you today, I mean, I'll grab a, you know, I'll just grab, you know, here's our gallon raspberry. You know, that's staked up with 1-year-old wood. I can see buds coming out now. I am going to pick berries off this plant this year. If I bought you a bare root one, you'd be looking at that little tiny twig about 6 inches tall, and I'm probably going to have to wait 2 seasons before I get anything to eat, kind of thing. So, you know, yes, I would not thin out the flowers on most of the berries myself. I would let them go and get most of the production.
Excellent. Somebody asked that they have lichen and moss on their blueberry bushes.
Yep.
Do you want to just move it, cut those branches off? What do you do about that?
Lichens and moss, I'm guessing they're local because that is local here for Western Washington. It is not the end of the world. I mean, I tell people this about all kinds of trees. We had the same discussion on fruit 2 weeks ago. It's not going to hurt the plant. I mean, it looks unsightly sometimes. I think it adds character, you know, kind of like the gray and the beard. Just adds a little character. But if you want to take it off, certainly do it. I would not go out and take big hunks of wood that have it on. I think you're probably going to cut some of your production out. Again, if we talk pruning, if you're following those principles and you're looking at a big old gnarly piece of wood in that blueberry that you've had for 30 years and it's covered in moss and lichen, it probably needs to get cut out anyway so that I can get some fresh wood and keep the plant going. I will say this, if you're going to spray for something like that, we cannot use iron moss killers, lawn moss killers. It's a very specialty product. We have it here. It's called Moss Max. It's a liquid and it is potassium soap. So you've got probably 2 or 3 weeks left is it to use it, because we use it in the dormant season only on trees, shrubs, whatever. And if I spray that on my plant, it will kill the moss, the lichen, the algae, all the other stuff. Use it on the sidewalk. You can use it all kinds of places. But, you know, again, I'm smiling as I'm saying, you live in Western Washington. I can promise you, you're going to have the same exact discussion next winter again, because it's going to come back a little bit.
Can you talk briefly about salmon berries? Do they grow for us up here in the Northwest, or do they like heat?
Boy, do they grow here in the Northwest. If we were out here on the Greenbelt, I could show you a bazillion. Salmon berries is a native. I used to eat them as a kid. They're not the tastiest thing in the world. They're certainly edible. That is the definition of a suckering shrub. Those are going to take over if you plant them around. They're everywhere here in the woods. You got salmon berries all over the place. So yes, they absolutely grow here. B, I'd be real careful when I put those in my yard. If you like them, more power to you. They're great berries, but I would definitely keep that in a different spot in my landscape because they are going to grow pretty aggressively.
What about blueberries that still have leaves on them? Should you remove them from the past season before new ones flush out?
Well, most of those plants will they'll probably drop the old foliage. I'm guessing they're talking about the ones I showed, the Bountiful Blue, the Sunshine Blue, some of those semi-evergreen ones. We don't have much winter. You know, typically they'll keep all their leaves and turn a little color, but hold on to the leaves. I got a feeling with what's happening here this week in the low 20s at night, you're probably going to see most of that stuff drop off here before they break bud. I wouldn't tell you to go out there with the microscope and pick every single leaf off your blueberry. That may be a labor of love. If you want to, great, more power to you. What I would do though is look real close at that berry on top and flip some leaves over and make sure the foliage that's left here coming out of winter doesn't have any rust spots on it, black spots, discoloration, because then I would be the beginning of leaf spot rust, perhaps a little bit of a foliage issue going into the spring. And then, yes, I would try to pick some of those off, clean it up a little bit, and perhaps even give it a little dormant spray here to make sure we start clean.
We talked about growing some varieties in containers. How do you know how large of a container you need?
Well, a little bit of a little bit of it's going to depend on the plant, but let's just take, me. I mentioned I have jelly bean blueberries, which I love, 2 big ones on my patio. I had them in a 12 or 15 inch frost-proof glazed pot, on the patio. I probably got 4 or 5 years out of them before they started. Okay, I didn't get much this summer. Something's going on. You walk out this time of year and you stick your fingers at the edge of the container. Am I feeling a solid root mass, or do I still have a little bit of free soil? Then I'm probably good for another year. At that point, I shifted mine. I've got them in big, bright orange because I like orange, 2 foot by 2 foot ceramic pots. It's been another 5 years already, and I'm guessing I'll have another 5 before I'll have to mess with it. So it doesn't need to be a half whiskey barrel kind of thing. But I would say for most of the blueberries, if you had a 2 by 2 nice outdoor container, that's going to last you for a long time. The raspberry is probably a little bit different because I have tried that in a pot. I don't have it anymore. I know a lot of people who do grow raspberry shortcake, the little dwarf one in a container. Yes, it's not a tall plant, but it's still a raspberry. So it's a lot of root system. And we plant a couple up here in pots every year for demos. I would say if you had a 2 foot container, you're probably going to get 3, 4, maybe 5 years out of it before you go without winter, dump it out, chop it into sections, transplant it out. You can have multiple pots. It's an easy thing to divide, and then we're back to happy again.
How do you feel about grow bags?
I don't mind grow bags. I grow all my potatoes in them, to be honest with you, although this year I'm making some new raised beds, so I'm probably going to put them in the ground. But I've done grow bags on a lot of stuff. Just be real careful with the water. The one thing I've noticed in my own garden, they drain very well, which is a good thing, but really watch the water a little bit more than I would probably in a hard walled, whether it's plastic or ceramic or clay or anything else. I would probably have a little bit more moisture retention. The grow bags work awesome. The other thing is they're black. So again, absorbing a little bit more heat usually.
We've had some questions about grass and weeds underneath berries. How can you control them organically specifically, or just get rid of it all?
No, that's a tough one because again, I don't like the grass right up. If you're setting up a traditional berry patch and we had long rows, we would try to keep, a good 2 or 3 foot strip without weeds and grass so our plants are happy, especially the grass because it's the great nutrient robber that would take most of the nutrition from your berries. If you have them now, I wouldn't grab a backhoe and dig up the whole row and start over. Just be real careful spraying. I personally would not use, glyphosate, Roundup, any kind of chemical. That would be my choice. You could. They will tell you, just be careful with it. Don't get it on your plants, point blank, and it'd be a lot easier, to do here when it's a little bit warmer. You're not going to get much action on herbicide with this cold out. So maybe it's mid-March to mid-April. We're warm up enough where you can go out and do a little bit of spraying. If it was me, I would use something natural. We would carry a couple of different things like Burnout or Botanical Cleanup is another product we have here. They're very effective on most grasses and this and that. It's not going to kill horsetail. There's some things that it won't get that you might have to get a chemical for, but it's very effective on a wide range of issues like that when it's a little bit warmer and we're actively growing. And I might say, if you've got a packed row, and I know what you mean because I have the same thing, how am I going to get in there and get every single little thing? Maybe I have to get a trowel and pop a couple that are right up against wood, but maybe I get a piece of cardboard a garbage can lid, anything I could set up against my plant, do my spraying so I'm not soaking any of that into the wood of the berry or getting it on the foliage. I'm not going to have the damage.
We've had some questions about raspberries in terms of some of the bugs and diseases, specifically the little white like worms that you see and also the yellow rust. Are there ways to get rid of both of these and deal with that issue?
Yeah, again, we're going to go on the natural side, but let's take the raspberries, probably the more of the poster child up here for rust and anthracnose, a number of different issues you may get. Again, the root system, if the root system is dry, is phase one. We can't have too much wet on raspberry. You're going to probably multiply your susceptibility by 4 if that's the case. So make sure we're high and dry for one. Our rows get thinned out. We got air moving through. We've got sun getting in there. That's going to help you quite a bit as well. If you had rust last year, get out and spray it now. You've got to get those beds cleaned out, get all the leaves out of there. If there's any leaves on the plant, cut them back, pick them, whatever you got to do, and get them sprayed so that you start spring clean. Then we can manage it from there. So is it copper? Yes, you could use copper. I could get a sulfur type fungicide. I don't have to get, again, nothing systemic ever for berries. There's a lot of options down here at the store for the disease control side of it. Now the bugs is going to be the same a little bit. If I had an issue last year, I want to make sure my row, my blade, whatever it is, I want it cleaned up before I get into that next spring. I don't want to take a chance of anything lingering on the ground, underneath leaves, on my stems. So make sure you get them cleaned up, get them sprayed with that copper and that horticultural oil. Would make sure you start clean for the season. The issue with the worm in particular is, we talked about apple maggot at the fruit tree class a couple weeks ago. It's the same idea. I don't have a magical answer for you to spray that raspberry and you're good to go for the season. I have to make sure I try to catch those flies when she flies in and starts plugging larvae into my little raspberries, then I get the worm. So if you keep up on something natural like BT, Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew is a great spray that's all organic for vegetables and berries and things. Those two things really take care of a lot of those little wormy, chewing type insects a natural way. It's not going to hurt anything at all, but I will definitely take care of those. So once we bloom this year, you've cleaned everything up, everything's good to go. And once you bloom this year and you start to get those berries produced, I would recommend you get some Captain Jack's, would be my first choice, and try to get that sprayed on there every couple weeks here as we get warm, and try to keep that fly, those larvae, from getting in the first place.
Do you have general tips or rules in terms of mulching and composting, how far you need to kind of put things up around the base or not to do?
Again, a little bit different with the plants. The blueberries you can bury. I mean, if you've seen blueberry farms, they may apply 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of bark or sawdust or compost or whatever every single year. I can bury up the stem on blueberry a little bit easier than anything else we've talked about. I would always try to get it mulched to the drip line. If I've got an old blueberry, they're not super wide. Maybe I'm 3, maybe 4 feet wide and I'm up. So I'm going to try to keep, say, a 3-foot circle nice and mulched underneath there. That would help keep the weeds down as well, right underneath those plants. If it's the strawberry, the raspberry, anything else we've talked about, and I want to apply a little bit of mulch, I do not want to bury up the stem. I don't want to keep burying it deeper and deeper. I'll probably have some issues, but I absolutely putting a top dress down of an inch or two with some food underneath it would be the way to go. Compost, I would go more the compost route because I think that's already pH neutral. It adds nutrition, all the rest of it. If you're a bark gardener, no worries. Just make sure you add fertilizer for sure underneath your bark. The problem with bark is if I apply it on the ground and it starts to degrade, it's going to take all the nitrogen out of your leaves. You probably have seen it in yards. If you really put a heavy dose of mulch down with no fertilizer, everything gets a little lighter green to yellow off color. It's not quite as crisp with something like compost.
And would all of this still be true if we're talking about plants in pots, or is this specific?
Absolutely. I mean, like for me, again, I'm going to go home here before my blueberries get done, and I do exactly what I told you to do. I'm going to have a cup of rhododendron food right around the top of my pots, and I'll go get compost, and I'll put an inch or so of that right off the top of the root system. A, it looks really nice on the patio that way, but B, that's going to help me with the moisture, keep the food locked in, and I'm going to have happy plants again this season.
Excellent. Are roly-polies or pill bugs, are those an issue on strawberries? Should we be concerned?
I love the word roly-poly, by the way. I think that's a great name. That's my 6-year-old favorite bug. So roly-polies, no, those are decomposers. So yes, if you have rotting strawberries, old foliage down that surface layer, yeah, you're going to have some roly-polies helping break that stuff down into fertilizer, but they're not causing any kind of issue with your strawberry plants.
Cool, good to know. Raspberries, sometimes the leaves turn yellow/orange. Is that normal? Is there anything we can do for that?
Well, I'd probably want to see a sample. If it's yellow, you're probably a little bit deficient on nitrogen. It could be iron even. You might look online or shoot me a picture. You can see, iron deficiency is going to have yellowish leaf, but I'll still see dark green veins, if that makes sense. We would get some chelated iron to correct that problem. We have it here at the store. If they're just off color, I bet you they need to be fed and mulched. Would probably do a world of good with that. The orange one worries me a little bit, to be honest with you. If the leaves are dying off, we got something probably going on with the root system, or if there's orange spotting on it, then we definitely have the rust that somebody already asked about. We want to make sure we get that sprayed for.
Real quick, jogging back to a question we just talked about in terms of the mulching and fertilizing. Do you need to remove the mulch in order to fertilize them properly? Do you mix it in? How do you make sure that all of that nutrients gets to the plant?
Well, again, and part of the reason why I always recommend organic is it's not as water soluble. So if I put an organic dose of fertilizer down, it's not going right through the soil. It's going to sit there and slow feed and work its way to the root system. Yes, to answer your question, that's exactly what I do every spring. I may mulch some of my yard in the fall, some of it in the spring. If I've already mulched, I will scrape that surface mulch away in a little circle, apply my fertilizer, and then just put it right back over the top of the food, or get a little bit more compost to mound it some. That will lock it in. Sometimes you might, man, I forgot to feed in the spring. I didn't get to it till later. You could put it right in the soil surface, and sometimes you just take your hose, don't turn it on, hydroplane jet spray, but if I put it on a little bit of pressure, I can sit there and just wash, see that fertilizer just get right into that surface soil, and I'd be fine with that as well.
Jumping to grapes, somebody asked about their grapes almost seem empty when they start to produce, almost like it's just the skin that's left. Is this a common issue? Should they send us email with more details?
Yeah, so send an email if you got any. I don't know if you have any pictures from last year or describe it a little bit. I can do a little. That's not something I've heard a lot of. I would guess no bug in the fruit. Or I'd probably play 20 questions with them, and then we'll figure out what's wrong. But I would guess there's got to be some kind of little worm or bug got in there to cause the deformation of the grape.
Excellent. I think we're starting to get to the end. We really appreciate everybody joining us. If there's any questions of yours that we didn't get to, or things that pop up after you leave us, we're happy to chat with you. We love plants and we're happy to talk about them. So send us an email, give us a call. We're here happy and ready to talk with you about it. We appreciate you joining us. Be sure to come down this week. Take advantage of the discount. That'll happen until Friday the 19th. Wow, we're almost halfway through February. And we hope to see you all tomorrow for our Roses class. It'll be tomorrow at 11 Pacific Standard Time, and we hope to see you then. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the day. Stay safe out there.